Hey y'all, I'm James Roy, and this is Amateur Astros Analysis, a show where I, an amateur Astros analyst, give you my amateur Astros analysis. On today's show, we'll be talking about the return of Altuve and Hensley going back down to AAA. We'll be talking about the possibility of Dubon at first with Abreu struggles, and then we'll be talking about how much longer do you think the Rangers will be holding on to the division lead. Jose Altuve made his return to the roster at the cost of David Hensley. I guess David Hemsley needed some time to find himself down in Sugarland. Altuve back up. I mean, it brings up a lot of questions here with the decision to send Hensley down, which is that he's a utility, and now that he's down, we still have three catchers, one of which can play first base, I guess, kind of. And then, we've got Dubon. Dubon is the utility on the roster right now. So I don't know if I really like the decision. As bad as Hensley has been at the plate, I thought the obvious choice was to send Salazar down. So I don't know if I necessarily agree with the call. I don't know who had a hand in what or who made that decision. But I mean, I think it's small potatoes compared to the Astros roster as a whole. It's not something that's going to make or break the team's ability to win in the future. Now, something that will definitely elevate the team's ability to win in the future this season is the fact that Jose Altuve is back on the roster. Now, as much as I wanted him to step up to the plate against the Athletics for the first time, 2 months to the day since he broke his hand and just absolutely just crush a home run to the Crawford boxes, it didn't happen that way. And he had a rough first go of it with just a walk to show through the first game. But in his second game, that little double lined to left center field. I mean, and getting on base and scoring, it was good. It was good to see Altuve sort of work his way back into his element. It was interesting to see them throw him straight away right back into the leadoff spot. I don't disagree with the call. I mean, personally, if he felt he was up for it, he's an Astros legend. So if I assume Dusty was like, "Yo, Tuve, are you good to lead off?" And he was like, "Yeah." And Dusty, not being hugely into analytics, he's embraced the hybrid approach, but he's still old school in the sense that, I feel like if his guy tells him he's good to go, he's gonna let him go. It's lovely to have Altuve back, and I'm excited to see what he's gonna do in the future. The A's is the perfect team to bring him back against because it's he went to the Hooks for his initial rehab assignment. So coming back to the Astros against the A's is basically like playing for the Sugarland Space Cowboys for your first three games. Before the first game of the series against the A's, Brian McTaggart posted a picture of Dubon getting work in at first, and it sparked the question in my head, probably a couple other people's heads, but I put it out there on Twitter. I did a poll. Is it possible the Astros are considering playing him at first? Now, there's a lot that goes into this. Like I said earlier, he's the only utility on the roster, so having the versatility to play at first is very important because he's probably going to rotate through the positions, giving guys breaks throughout the week. It would make sense to have him ready to do that. Now, the other part of this is that, Yainer Diaz is capable of playing first base. He might be the guy that's giving that break to Abreu. But with as bad as Abreu has been at the plate, he's been solid defensively. But is there reason to believe that if Dubon could prove to be serviceable as a first baseman on the defensive end, that it would be worthwhile to switch him in for Abreu? Now, I've said it before, Abreu was brought onto the roster to be a first baseman that can also power hit. And the only thing he's not really done very well is hit for power. He gets on base. He has a 220, 230 batting average. Not the worst thing you've ever seen, but his WAR, his stats just don't indicate that he's super useful. But the money you put into him, you feel like you kind of have to play him, right? But if Dubon was capable of being an everyday first baseman, would that change anyone's mind? That's yet to be seen. I don't know if he even has any experience playing first. The only thing that's really drawing that conclusion for me is it's much like the Yainer Diaz versus Maldonado debate, which is that if Yainer can play catcher as well as Maldonado, but his bat is better, why are we not putting him in more than Maldonado? It's a question that, in Maldonado's case, a lot of people are super loyal to Maldonado and they just want to see him do well. They don't want to see him get benched. He's been the guy. And I mean, I love Martin Maldonado. I don't have a problem with it either way right now. I don't think it's costing us games to play one or the other. And, Maldonado's not necessary. He's not great at hitting, but he's serviceable. if even. That's not the point. The point is that in the discussion of Dubon versus Abreu, we have to look at Abreu and go, he doesn't have that same grace. So if Dubon is hitting better than Abreu and can play first base as adequately as Abreu has, why not make him play at least split reps? But I mean, it would make sense to start him at that position if he fits it, right? At the end of the day, the question is, Abreu costs a lot of money. Do you move on from him this, I don't want to say early in the season, we're getting pretty deep into it, but do you move on from him if Dubon gives you the ability to feel comfortable doing that? I'd love to know your answer to that question, because for me personally, I mean, obviously if it makes sense, it makes sense, but I'd like to believe that Abreu's just in a long slump and that he'll make it out. But if it's for the best of the team, I mean, throw Dubon in there, right? But I'd love to have your input. So in the comments, let me know. As of this recording, the Astros are currently 2 games down from the Rangers in the division. As we all know, the Astros are historically slow starters. Having been a fan that started my fandom, around the 2005 season, and having watched the Astros be counted out of everything early on in that season, that was something, that was one of the first things I remember my dad saying to me about the Astros. I'd be like, "Wow, Dad, we're not doing very well this season," and he'd be like, "Don't worry, the Astros just start slow." And it led me to a lot of times unreasonably believe that the Astros were gonna pick it up in the second half of the season and make a run. But with that in mind, we've reached that point. It's nearing the end of May. Any one of the teams in the AL West has at some point had the lead in May. But what matters is who has the lead at the end of the season. That's likely to be the Astros, in my opinion. And so the question becomes, how long is it before the Rangers get overtaken by the Astros? Looking forward through the end of the month, the Rangers take on the Pirates, Orioles, and Tigers for their next 3 series. The Astros will take on Milwaukee, Oakland, and Minnesota. Just looking at a glance, it seems like the Astros have a lot better chance of coming up with 3 more games than the Rangers over this stretch of time. I don't think it's this next series. I think that against Milwaukee and the Pirates, the both teams will face their fair share of difficulties with those teams. I don't necessarily think that is when the Astros take the lead. When I do think they do is when the Astros take on Oakland. So by May 28th, the Astros should be in the front in the league. The Rangers will be playing the Orioles at that time. And so on May 28th, or maybe slightly sooner, I believe the Astros could take the lead back in the division. That's my working timeline right now. I'd love it to be sooner, and I'd hate to be wrong. But if you want my guess, by May 28th, the Astros will be in the lead in the AL West. This has been another edition of Amateur Astros Analysis. I've been James Roy, and if you want to follow me on social media, I am at M1 Texans fan. And speaking of the Texans, there are other Houston teams that I have series about. The Texans, the Dynamo, the Rockets. I talk about all those teams. So if you like those teams, you should follow me and you should subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and till next time, stay classy, Houston.